Hi, this is Lori from GLP-1 Journey in Review. Today I'm doing a video in my interview series where we talk to people about their weight loss and their health journeys. Today we have with us Mark, who also has a YouTube channel, which will be linked down below in the description. If you find any of this information helpful, please hit that like and subscribe button, then go over to Mark's channel and do the same. I want to remind everybody that I am not a healthcare provider. My guest is not a healthcare provider. We're talking about what works for us. All that being said, Mark, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. Well, hi, Lori. Thank you for inviting me onto the show. I really appreciate it. My name's Mark Charbonneau, like you mentioned. My background is actually in science. I'm a scientist, trained in biology originally. Got my PhD about 10 years ago now. And since then, I've worked in the drug development and biotech industry, mostly in the Boston area. And I've struggled with my weight really my entire adult life. Kind of yo-yoed up and down. In the worst cases, dealt with eating disorder. And so when I found out about the GLP-1 drugs, I was really interested and thought that this might be a good option for me to manage my own weight loss. And so I found out about them actually at a nutrition conference about 2 years ago, where presenters were talking about GLP-1s and the impact they were having, especially on the food industry and how food companies are looking at this, how it's affecting their bottom line. So I was very curious, talked to my doctor about it. And in the spring of 2024, I started on a GLP-1. I'm on Tirzepatide, and over the past couple of years, I've lost about 80 pounds, and I'm now in the journey of learning how to maintain that. I'm very happy with my weight and my results, but maintenance is a whole other kettle of fish. So I'm really excited to share that experience. That's part of why I started a YouTube channel, is to share not only my scientific training with people and helping to demystify in science, but also with real life topics like this, like with GLP-1s, helping people to understand them, helping people advocate for themselves with their healthcare providers, and hoping that experience can be helpful for others.
Awesome. So why did you pick Tirzepatide versus semaglutide?
Okay. So when I got started on GLP-1, I was getting it compounded. So at the time, because I am not a diabetic, my insurance would not cover the drugs for weight loss purposes. Some insurance plans do. I think it depends on your employer, but mine didn't. And so the best option I had available to me, unless I wanted to pay full list price, getting it at the pharmacy, was to get it compounded. And so that's what I did. I actually went to a med spa where they had a whole weight loss program built around it, which for me was actually a really good option, because what it meant was that not only was I getting the medication, but that I was also working with a nurse practitioner and meeting with this person every month, so they could help monitor my weight, my body composition, and my side effects, my dose, all that kind of thing. And for that program, Tirzepatide is what they were offering. And so that I had also read that Tirzepatide had fewer side effects associated with it, which in my case was appealing, because I also suffer from gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD, which is basically acid reflux. And so I was really worried about starting on something that was going to slow down my GI tract and maybe cause more heartburn, and I've had issues with that in the past and was concerned about that being worse. And so that seemed like a better option for me at the time.
Did you have any more GERD or any side effects?
I did, yes. So the side effects that I had were primarily, I had some heartburn, but most of the side effects that I had were nausea. It was nausea associated, and that was with really anytime I started a new dose, that's what would happen. For over the first couple of weeks starting on a new dose, I would start having some heartburn, some nausea. The nausea kind of went away on its own, and the heartburn, I've learned to manage that. As I think people with GERD, you kind of learn to work around it. Doing things like you don't lay down flat after you eat. That's really important, because then acid can get out of your stomach into your esophagus. You have to stay upright for at least an hour after you eat. And so doing that helped a ton. And then the other symptoms kind of went away over time. I haven't talked about this before, actually, but something else that happened is much farther into my weight loss journey, when I lost a lot
Hmm.
of weight, I started having it went kind of too far, to the point where I was having low blood pressure because I wasn't eating enough and drinking enough. And
Hmm.
then I would get, like I'd stand up and I'd get dizzy, and that kind of thing would happen. And that, I think there's a solution for that, which is you just try to eat and drink more. But it's maybe something to watch out for if folks are on them for a long time.
I could understand that one because while I was losing my weight, I was on two blood pressure medications and not thinking that my blood pressure was regulating itself. I passed out. And I just assumed because I'm not a breakfast eater, and I just worked out that, oh, it's probably low blood sugar. But then when it happened the next day, something dawned on me to take my blood pressure, and it was like 90 over 50 something.
Wow.
Uh, and
Yeah.
and it just so happens that, I work in healthcare as an imaging tech,
Mhm.
and my cardiologist just happened to be there. And he's like, okay, well, stop taking your blood pressure medications. And if that doesn't, put salt back into your diet. And I had
Yeah.
an appointment with him in 2 weeks. He goes, well, we'll see how you're doing then. And basically, he was telling me that, now that your blood pressure is regulated, salt is your friend. So, don't be afraid of salt. Uh, Actually, he introduced me to element electrolytes that had salt,
Yeah.
which I kind of suck on all day long, and that seemed to have taken care of it. So, I could understand how
Yeah.
people's
That
blood
are you are
pressure
now are
goes
you
down.
still off of the blood pressure medication? Are you off
I
that
am.
permanently?
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
I'm hoping because I've been in maintenance now for a year, which is, like you said, is a whole tricky thing in itself.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I had a similar check-in with my doctor where she took my blood pressure, and I don't remember what it was. It was something like 100 over, I don't know, 70 or something. And she's like, okay, so your blood pressure's a little low. I need you to eat more salt. And I remember thinking, I've never expected a doctor to say that to me before. It's always been the opposite. And so that was interesting. But yeah, similar here. We have a big box of Element downstairs. I don't like the taste of it very much, so I'm trying to find an alternative.
I got very used to it, and I kind of enjoy it now. It took me a couple weeks, but now I really enjoy that salt. So, lesson learned. So, what kind of dose did you get up to?
Yeah, so on Tirzepatide, you start at 2.5, or at least I think most people do. So that's where I
Hmm.
started as an intro dose. I didn't really have much weight loss on that dose, and then I think that's expected. Went up to 5, was on 5 for quite a while, maybe 6 months, and then I went to 7.5. And I was on 7.5 for the majority of the time that well, I'm still on the medication, but the majority of the time that I was losing the weight. At the very tail end, I did very briefly go up to 10 milligrams, but I didn't have much more weight to lose. And so I went back down. Started titrating back down. So 7.5 and then back down to 5. I'm currently on 5, and I've been on that now for about 6 months. And that's what I'm trying to make work as my maintenance dose. With the idea being that if I'm going to be on a medication like this for a long term, I want to be on as low a dose as I can
Hmm.
manage.
Yeah, I was fine. I was on 7.5 up until I want to say like 3 weeks ago, and I guess like after a year, like the food cravings started sneaking back just a little bit,
Mm,
a little bit more than I wanted. So when I talked to the provider, he said, well, why don't we increase it and see how you do? And that's
mm.
pretty much where I am. I'm hoping I could go back down and, maybe after a month or two of stabilizing, I could slowly go back down, which is one reason why I like the compound because I could do it a little bit slower if I
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah, and at the time that I was getting started, I think 7.5 wasn't offered in the normal doses because they also weren't selling it in vials at the time. It was only in with the auto injector that you do
Mhm.
and so I think it was just 2.5, 5, and 10 at that time. I might be mistaken about that, but that allowed me to go like I actually did incremental, kind of like I went like 6,
Mhm.
7, slowly went up.
Well, I find that very helpful with the compound. And I know if they're talking about changing to the quick pens, which has the clicks, and you could somewhat regulate the dose because it's a month dose in the pen.
Yeah,
If
I
that's
found
what they're
that.
talking about with the new Zepbound.
Okay. Yeah, I did for a couple months. I when I actually very first got started, I did have the pen, but there was a shortage on those. That ended up being a problem. But that was really nice from a just from like a patient standpoint of being able to use it, because it was. So I mean, I've worked in labs for so many years that for me, using a syringe and injecting myself was really not that big of a deal. And I imagine for people who have diabetes, that's also something they're very used to. But for a lot of people, I guess it's two things. One is having sort of the skill set to be able to manage all that stuff and learn to use the
Hmm.
syringe is kind of a learning process itself. And a lot of people are really uncomfortable with needles. And so the pen makes it really nice because you just essentially put it against your belly and push a button and it's done. So I think for a lot of people that's a really good option, but I think that they're more expensive. They end up being more expensive because of the pens.
Hmm. In reality, from what I was reading, the pens themselves only cost like $1
Oh, really?
for the drug companies. So yeah, they're making it more of a big deal. But
Okay.
like I said, I like the fact that you could kind of go in between doses, which I found very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I think at this point, maintenance is kind of that's the name of the game, right? What do we do for
Mhm.
the long run? And when I started the process, I said to myself, if I can at least have some progress on this, and I honestly never thought I was going to lose as much weight as I did. I got down to weight that I really haven't been since high school, which is great. But I just wanted to be healthier, and similar to
Mhm.
you, my blood pressure's in a better spot, my cholesterol's in a better spot. I'm not snoring at night as much as I was before, so I'm getting better sleep. Um, so all around, the health benefits have been tremendous, and I want to try to maintain that as much as I can. But in my view, the way that these medications have been studied in the clinic. So the way that drug companies design clinical studies, if I can go on a little bit of a tangent, is around demonstrating efficacy. Is it going to have the effect that you intended to have, and is it going to be safe when it does that? And so the clinical studies are designed in a placebo-controlled way, where people are either put on an injection that has nothing, or on the medication. And then they look at how the weight trends between the two groups, and then you can control for placebo effects. Because you could imagine a scenario where someone believes they're on a medication that's going to make them lose weight, they end up eating a little bit less food and they lose some weight. And what the clinical trials have shown is that these drugs are very effective. Tirzepatide is approaching the efficacy of bariatric surgery, and you have newer versions that are under being researched now that are
Mhm.
potentially even more efficacious than Tirzepatide. But because that is the goal of the clinical study, not maintenance. There's not an incentive necessarily for the pharma company to continue monitoring what happens at lower doses, or if you titrate the doses down. And so the people at the end of the studies, they go off cold turkey. And what you see again and again in these studies is that people will regain 50 to 60% of the weight that they lost over the span of about a year. And my view is that a big part of that, and I don't have any data to back this up, but my view is the big part of that is because they don't have the support for those people that they need, right? So you've taken away this biological signal that your body has been using to say, I'm not hungry. That just goes away. And you're not supplementing that with nutrition, exercise programs to help support these individuals. You're not necessarily bringing the doses down so their body can get readjusted to the levels of hunger and satiety that they had before the medication. And I think that sets people up for failure if you just do it in that cold turkey kind of way. And I think that we have a
Mhm.
lot to learn still about what it takes to maintain the weight loss, the effects over the long term.
Yeah, I know when I talked to my provider, he's like, we have several options because I told him, of course, I want to go down to as low as dose as I can. One, to save some money, and it just makes sense to be on as little of a medication as possible. And he's like, well, we could either do that or we could, maybe spread it out to every 10 days. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, to them, they're all still working on it, and these are the so-called experts. So, there's lots of ways people go with that.
Yeah, I did a video on this looking at, there's a research paper that came out looking at the idea of spacing it out more, right? So not necessarily bringing your dose down, but doing it, like you say, every 10 days or every 14 days instead of every 7.
Hmm.
And it was essentially, it wasn't like a clinical study. It was a paper where they were doing like computer modeling of this,
Hmm.
where they were taking into account, because we do know a lot about like how long the drugs stay in our body,
Hmm.
right, from the studies that have been done. And so they were saying, if you were to space it out, what does that do to the effective concentration, and how does that correspond to how people have been able to maintain their weight? And basically what it showed is that if you were to space it out to 10 days, you could still maintain most of the weight, right? And that would be a significant reduction in the amount that you're taking it. And then every, 14 days is a little bit less, and, so on. The more you stretch it out, the less effect you're going to have, because you have less concentration in your body over time.
Hmm. Yes, several ways, like I said, to do that. What really surprised me is like I had to go through like 3 doctors before I found one that had any knowledge, on GLP-1. And unlike some of the telehealth, which seemed to be a little bit more knowledgeable, I mean, it was
Mm.
difficult to find one. And, my original um, PCP is like, just eat less, work harder,
Right,
until I
right.
found one, that even, agreed, but didn't know too much. And then she's like, okay, so why don't you come to me for everything else and have the online person manage it, but we'll have our regular visits and
Mm.
you know update it and so forth, which seems to be the way I went. I know I kind of wish that uh, PCPs and regular doctors knew more about this, because I mean this is becoming a way of the future, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, you said something that I wanted to bring up at some point in the conversation, which is this idea of, because I've gotten some comments on YouTube and things like this along that line of exercising doesn't cost anything and eating less doesn't cost anything. And so, there's the solutions built in. You don't have to do this. And I have really mixed, I have really mixed feelings about that. First, it is objectively true that if you eat less food and you exercise more, you will lose weight. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
just physics. That's just how our world works. But there's a reason why half of the United States is overweight or obese. And I don't think it's because they don't know that. My personal view is that everyone knows that if you eat less food and if you exercise more, you will lose weight. And yet we still have an epidemic of obesity in this country. I don't think that means everybody's stupid. And I don't think that it means that nobody has willpower. Maybe that's true for some people, but I don't think that's true for most people. I think that it's more complicated than that, and that there are underlying biological factors and systemic factors about our food system, the kinds of foods that we have available to us, the cost of nutritious, low-calorie foods, that skew things in a way that predispose people to gaining weight. And so while I wish it was the case that we didn't need a medication, that we did not have to inject ourselves with something in
Mm-hmm.
order to maintain our weight and maintain all these, and it's not just cosmetic, all these health benefits that we're talking about, I wish that wasn't the case, but that isn't the system that we live in right now. So while I think in the long run, we are all better positioned by advocating for systemic change to our food system, to nutrition education, to
Mm-hmm.
exercise education, and for the food systems themselves, eradicating food deserts, for example, where people only have access to highly processed foods, that should be a long-term goal. But in the near term, if we want to get people in the best health and wellness space that they can be, I do think this is a very good option.
I've noticed that even the fast food places, for example, we'll take Starbucks now has, protein coffees and high
Hmm.
protein meals. Now they're a little too expensive on them, but that's besides the point. They're trying to at least change with the times.
Yeah, I think they have to. I think they have to, because you're right. The number of people who are on or want access to GLP-1 medications is very large. And I believe that the costs will continue to come down over time. We've already seen with Tirzepatide provided by Lilly Direct, the prices have come down recently,
Hmm.
And so I think that's going to continue to be the case, because there are so many. Well, first of all, the demand is enormous. Everybody wants the drugs. Not everybody, but a lot of people want the drugs.
Hmm.
And there are so many in development, compounds in development by different companies, that the competition is going to be very intense. I think that's going to bring the prices down. And food companies, including that provide prepared foods, they have to adapt. Going back to that conference where I first was learning about this, it was a nutrition and longevity conference. One of the talks that I saw was about someone who works with large retailers, and they were talking about Walmart. And at Walmart, they have pharmacies in their store, and of course, they also sell groceries. And
Mhm.
they have databases that can connect people. So if you have a customer who gets their prescriptions from the pharmacy and also shops there, they could connect that information. And they were able to find that people on GLP-1s were buying significantly less food than people who were not on them, which seems intuitive, but it caused a panic, for people running Walmart to say, well, we rely on people buying food. So how do we adapt? And I think that this comes back to what I was saying about the systemic situation that we're in, that part of our economy relies on people buying too much food. And so we have to adapt to a situation where we're providing more nutritious options for people in an affordable way, and not just packing everything with high fructose corn syrup.
Absolutely. And I don't know, last time I was at the grocery store and I went down the frozen food aisle, I'm seeing all these, GLP-1 friendly stamps on these food now. They don't necessarily change the food, they just
They
have
just
that
say that.
marketing GLP-1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's kind of jumping in on that bandwagon.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a marketing element to that, I think.
Absolutely. Now, you were talking about Lilly Direct. I can't seem to remember a medication that came out. I think they've been around, what, 2.5, 3 years, somewhere around there, that has basically come down half price in such a quick time. Because just a few years ago, it was basically, 1,200, where
Mhm.
now, you could get it for like, $400 or $500 through Lilly Direct starting price.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, and I think that's going to continue to go in that direction. It's just the case where I believe it is unlikely that maybe eventually this will happen where insurance will cover it broadly for people. Maybe that'll happen with the costs coming down, because if it's $1,500 a month or something, that's a big ask if you're talking about tens of millions of people on an insurance plan. But if it's $100 a month, then maybe that's something that they will cover. So that might change over time. But I think it's the market forces, right? The demand is so high. There's that
Hmm.
opportunity for them to market it that way, and to sell it to more people. And we could do a whole other hour on drug pricing, but drug list prices, it's a whole other. It has nothing to do with the manufacturing costs. It has everything to do with getting return on investment,
Research.
and drug list prices are so opaque, because the way that it's complicated. But one of the ways that it works behind the scenes is that insurance companies have someone negotiate for them on behalf of the insurance company to bring the prices down, so they have to pay less. And so those people, those companies, those middlemen, which are called pharmacy benefit managers, they're incentivized to negotiate down as much as possible. That's how they get paid. And so it creates a system where if the list price is high, they can negotiate it down more, and they get more of a discount, they get more kickback. And then the insurance company is paying a lot less than that list price. But us regular people, when we're going to buy something, we don't have that person advocating for us. So if we want to buy it directly, we have to pay that extreme list price. And nobody really knows what the insurance companies are actually paying behind the scenes. So it's a very sort of cloak and dagger kind of operation. And I really think there should be more transparency all around in that system.
Absolutely. What is your opinion of orforglipron? And now they have the pill form of Wegovy coming out in a month or so. Uh, to me, I thought it would be good on maintenance because I don't really care if it's not quite as effective. And I think taking a daily pill may,
Yeah.
even things out. And I thought it would come in at a little bit lower price, and maybe it will in time.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the first thing that you mentioned, but the the orally administered GLP-1 agonists, I think, are really receptor agonists are a really wonderful option for a lot of use cases. I mean, you have people who can't or won't do injections, and so it's a good option for them. I think that it's, like you said, I think it's a great option for maintenance because, well, I guess a couple things. One, like you said, if you're on maintenance, you may not need something that's quite as efficacious as the injection. You're just trying to maintain where you're already at. So that could make a
Mm-hmm.
lot of sense. I think that practically there are also some benefits too. I think one of the challenges with these drugs that have to be kept cold is traveling with
Mm-hmm.
them. And so, it's a lot easier if you just have capsules that you can kind of put in with your vitamins or with your medications that you take in the morning. It's not something I've personally looked into yet, but I think it's a really great tool to have in the toolbox.
Absolutely, because being refrigerated is a huge cost because your Walgreens or CVS or whatever pharmacy you have, Walmart, they just can't go to Home Depot and buy a refrigerator. It's got to be
Right.
an FDA special refrigerator, and we're not talking $1,000. We're talking big bucks, and
Yeah.
that's part of where the pricing is, and
Hmm.
it's got to get from the manufacturer to the pharmacies,
Right.
refrigerated, which also costs money. And, they're talking bringing it in at like $199, which I think is a little high. But if they could get that down to like $99, I think that insurance companies may push uh, GLP-1s to the oral medications and actually pay for it at that
Yeah.
price, where at least it's an option for people who can't afford the compounding or the Lilly Direct or something like that.
I think that's probably true. One of the costs, and I hadn't considered this until you said it just now, is the fulfillment, right? So if you're shipping
Hmm.
something cold chain, so Lilly Direct ships it directly to your house, and so every month I get a box shipped to my house that's like a styrofoam box has cold packs inside of it that keep the vials cold, and that's really expensive. Now I don't know exactly how much it
Hmm.
costs them, but I would be willing to bet that $25 out of that month's supply is just them trying to ship it directly to my house, and they have to
Hmm.
do that. They can save money if they do it all in bulk, like if they ship it all to like a massive pharmacy warehouse or something. But if they're shipping it individually to everyone's house, that's very costly. And I completely agree with you that if it can be done room temperature with um, an oral capsule, or a tablet, that's a much better solution for a lot of reasons.
So again, I'm hoping that insurance companies will at least pay for that one, so people could get some sort of coverage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, changing the subject just a little bit, um, what does a day of food look like for you?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, it has changed over time. I think when I was on a higher dose, when I was on 7.5 and 10, I wasn't eating all that much, to be honest with you. And just didn't change the places I was eating very much. I was still eating out and, buying prepared foods. And of course, we cook at home. But I did find myself changing my food preferences also. Right. So I found myself avoiding very fatty, greasy foods and I don't know if you or I haven't talked to others if
Mhm.
they've experienced that either, but the very greasy fried foods sort of it would just sort of make me feel ill. And so it was nice, sort of natural. Well, I don't know, naturally with the medication, I was trending towards the healthier foods,
Mhm.
higher fiber, vegetables, lean meats than I was before. And still those preferences are there. And I feel like that's a big part of maintenance and part of what's kind of gotten ingrained with me. Um, but I would say that the types of foods that I'm eating now are the same kinds of foods that I was eating before. I still eat out. I had Burger King for lunch today, but I didn't eat the entire thing, and so the calorie counts are not as scary when you kind of give yourself permission to stop when you're full, or you learn to recognize, because you've been on the medicine, what full feels like, and
Mhm.
eat more healthy portions.
And what is your favorite protein?
Ooh, good question. Um, I love beef. I know that the answer probably should be chicken, but
Yeah, I enjoy, but my preference, where like I used to like prime rib and stuff, not that I don't like it, but I'll lean more towards the filet mignon because it's a little
okay.
less fatty.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, like things like pork belly, it's a little too much, too fatty. And I've also recently bought an air fryer, which helps with using
Hmm.
a lot less oil in cooking, and keep things a bit healthier.
Absolutely. Um, do you exercise?
I do, yeah. And so this is something that I think is really important. And one of the benefits of being on this sort of, when I started with the med spa and there was a whole program of exercise and body composition measurement every month, was advocating for that. So I've exercised since I started on the medication, initially just doing cardio, but for the past year, I have focused on doing strength training at least 3 times a week. And so I bought a gym membership, and I've been very consistent about going, lifting weights, and adding some cardio into the mix too. And this is really, really important. And the reason for that is that if you are on one of these medications and you're not eating as much, you will lose weight. But it's important to think about not just the weight, but what weight you're losing. And just to shift focus away from just body weight and BMI and towards body composition. Because the real culprit here, what we're trying to bring down, is body fat. Fat's, of course, very inflammatory. It causes many issues in our body, and that's what we're trying to get rid of. But when we gain or lose weight, fat and lean body mass, they tend to go together. You're either in an anabolic or a catabolic state, typically. And so losing fat and gaining muscle at the same time is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And so the name of the game, if you're losing a significant amount of body weight, is to try to maintain as much of that lean body mass, the muscle and the bone, as you can, compared to the fat, and try to skew it towards that. And the best way to do that is to send the signals to your body that you need that muscle, that you need the muscle and you need the bone to be strong. And you do that by resistance training and strength training. And that doesn't mean you have to go be doing power lifts and be an Olympic bodybuilder, but really just any weightlifting, as whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you can manage at your current level of strength, is going to be so helpful. And so for me, that's something that I've been very consistent about, and I'm really proud of. And I think that it has actually helped me to have more success along the GLP-1 journey than just taking the medication on its own. And
do you take any supplements?
It depends. So one of the things that I do with my doctor is I monitor my vitamin D and calcium levels. And because I was vitamin D deficient at one point, and so I try to keep that up. So when that dips, I'll do that. We talked about Element earlier, so I'll do things like Element or like a sugar-free Gatorade to try to keep my electrolytes up, keep my blood pressure up. So those things I think are really important. But this is related to something else that I think is worth bringing up, and hasn't got as much attention until now. We talked about, and I think a lot of people know about this issue of losing muscle, right? But something that the research is showing we need to start paying more attention to is bone also. And so it's pretty well known that if you lose a lot of body weight, you're also going to lose some bone mass. But a recent, and the research on how GLP-1s affect bone has been kind of mixed. I think the jury was still out. But I saw a recent paper that looked at retrospectively at a large number of studies. I think the total number of people they examined was around 23,000 people. And what they found is that, and this was focused on Tirzepatide, that people who were on Tirzepatide over a year lost a significant amount of their bone mass. And so that's another thing that we, I think, collectively need to be paying attention to, is our bone mass and trying to maintain as much bone as we can. Again, it's related to that supplementation with vitamin D and calcium, with strength training to send those signals to your body to maintain as much bone as you can. And especially for, I think a lot of people who are on GLP-1s were in midlife or later. And I'm older than I look, by the way. And we're already predisposed to losing bone. So we reach peak bone mass in our early 30s. Everybody does, men and women. We reach peak bone mass in our early 30s, and we lose bone generally slowly throughout the rest of our lives. Now, for women, it is much more pronounced, because what happens around the menopause transition is women will rapidly go through a period of bone loss where they'll lose about 10% of their bone in the span of about 5 years. And that's what leads to women having higher rates of osteoporosis, ultimately needing DEXA scans and to be able to maintain that bone. And so if you're adding on top of that a routine or a medication that could be causing you to lose even more bone, it's really important to be aware of that and to try to advocate. I think that the recommendation is talk to your doctor, but to try to keep an eye on that. The current recommendations for DEXA scans for bone mass are to not scan for bone mass until you're age 65. And by then, 80% of women already have low bone mass or have osteoporosis. And so we really should be looking earlier, especially if you're on one of these medications that could have a negative impact on it.
Absolutely. Have you tried any of the peptides like NAD plus, or have any opinion on them? Or
I have not tried those. No, I mean, I think the only other supplement that I've tried is creatine as part of
Mhm.
trying to maintain lean muscle mass. Do you recommend NAD? I haven't checked it out.
I just have been using it for almost 4 months now, and I've noticed a big difference in my energy, or lack of not wanting to take naps anymore like I used
Mm,
to. Um, I don't know if I could blame that on the GLP-1 or just getting a little bit older, or I work a lot, so it's like
yeah,
probably a combination. But I've noticed that I have a lot more energy since I've started taking it. So.
yeah. I don't know how you find time to do YouTube. That's really that's really exciting.
I try to weigh out my time. Have you tried any, by lack of other terms, I use the word hacks, like red light therapy or cryotherapy or anything like that?
Not too much, no. I kind of work in that industry, so I see a lot of vendors in these things. The most recent thing I got, I think it's called I don't remember what it's called, but it's like electrical stimulation. Like you have these like
Hmm.
pads that you can kind of put on different muscle groups, and then you have it's almost like a remote
A
control.
TENS unit looking.
Thames, yes, that's what it was called. So I have that, and I use that for stimulating different muscle groups. It's really helpful, especially for recovery. Like if I'm sore, so sometimes I'll get lower back some soreness, right, from doing my exercises, and I have this sort of butterfly shaped what do you call it, attachment that can stick on my lower back, and then I can kind of have the electrical system kind of
Hmm.
effectively massage that and kind of help with that recovery over time. So that wasn't cheap, so I don't know if I'd recommend it for everyone, but if you have the opportunity to try it out, I got I got hard sold on it because I was just walking. I was working a conference and I was walking through, and the guy said, "Do you want to try this out?" And so I said, "Sure." And he put it on, and it felt incredible. And so I ended up purchasing it, but um, it's been good for me.
I think one of the latest crazes are the vibration plates,
Mm,
supposedly that help drain the lymphatic system, which I know how slow they are because years and years ago, when I first started in X-ray, we used to do an exam called the lymphangiogram, which is now extinct. But
mm.
literally, like you would inject into the lymph vessels and take pictures 24 hours, 48 hours a week, and sometimes 2 weeks later to see the progress. So it's very slow moving. So I could understand how it works, but then I see people that are saying, "Oh no, it burns calories." And I think if you're going to use
Uh,
it in place of exercise, wrong use maybe helps with recovery, but
yeah,
or
yeah.
lymphatic
I
drainage.
mean, I've tried. I haven't. I don't own one of those, but I visited a longevity clinic in Sausalito, California, and they had all of these setups. Right, they had the red light therapy. They had a cryotherapy chamber. They had one of these. I actually stood on it. One of these lymphatic mover plates. It was kind of fun, but I don't know if it moved my lymph at all. Um, and other really interesting technology there, like a a setup where you do low intensity exercise, and then you would have these like cuffs that would go on your major muscle groups, and it would run cold water over your muscles to keep them cold
Hmm.
while you're exercising. And the idea was that would, with lower exertion, create more sort of muscle growth, more performance improvement. So it's really interesting. I don't know too much about the science underlying that, but there's certainly a lot of interest in it and a lot of options out there for people who are interested in seeking those things out.
And I want to talk a little bit. The medication was originally designed for diabetes, and then they noticed people have lost weight. Since then, they have noticed, that heart health improves, sleep apnea improves.
Mhm.
I think the one that surprises me the most is that they're saying that you have like a 10 to 15% less chance of getting Alzheimer's if you're on a GLP-1.
Hmm.
They're still in studies on that. I don't, know exactly what the outcome's going to be, but I mean, the fact that they're maybe something to help prevent it is like phenomenal to me. Is there any, side effect from the GLP-1 like that impresses you the most?
Well, I mean, I think that I'm really curious to see what it's going to do for longevity overall, for healthy aging. And the reason I say that is because the prevalent theory now is that many of the aging associated diseases that we experience when we get older are driven by inflammation. It's sort of a common underpinning for them. And inflammation is, it happens to everyone as we get older. What happens is our cells of our body start secreting more pro-inflammatory signals over time. It just happens as we get older. But the thinking is that if you have greater levels of chronic inflammation, that can accelerate the onset of those diseases. So you mentioned things like cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease. And we know that fat tissue, adipose tissue, is pro-inflammatory, especially the adipose tissue that surrounds our internal organs, or visceral fat. It's very pro-inflammatory. And I think one of the benefits of having better, maintenance of our body weight, of losing weight on something like a GLP-1, is not only getting down our body fat in terms of the fat under our skin, but also that visceral fat. And that will bring down inflammation overall. And I think it's going to have tremendous benefits across our bodies overall. And we're not going to really know what those benefits are. People they try to scare us, and they say, well, you don't know what's going to happen to your body in 20 years. Just wait and see. Well, I want to know what good things are going to happen to my body in 20 years from not carrying around 80 pounds of body fat and an extra 12 pounds of visceral fat on my body all the time. I think that those benefits, at least in my mind right now, for me personally, outweigh the negatives. And that's why I'm on it. And I think over time, we're going to learn a lot. I've already seen tremendous change in my own life in so many different dimensions. Obviously, there's sort of, there's comfort. There's my cardiovascular measures. You mentioned sleep apnea. My doctor was telling me I needed a CPAP machine before I started on the GLP-1, but now I don't need that at all. And so I really do think that there are so many benefits beyond just losing weight.
Absolutely. So I don't, I could only speak for myself, but when I originally started this medication, I was going to like jumpstart a diet. And then because I thought it was very expensive. And then when I found it somewhat reasonable, I'm like, oh, and this is really doable. I'm not like other diets, hungry all the time, worrying about, oh, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to survive on raw cauliflower and broccoli? That wasn't the case. So I started to stay on it. And then I'm like, oh, I just want to get to my, lowest weight that I could really remember, which was like 140. And then when I hit 140, I'm like, well, I'm kind of still, in the overweight category. Let me get down to, even though the BMI is outdated, let me get down to, my normal weight. And then I was there, and I'm like, well, I'm kind of at the high end of it. Let me get to the middle of it. Then I got to the middle of it. Well, I don't want to have to worry about gaining. Maybe I should lose a couple more pounds. And then I decided, okay, I'm where I want to be. And now you see a lot of people, especially Hollywood and so forth. Everybody's, gung ho. I want to lose 5 pounds to get me on this medication. I'm going to do it. I've, seen people at the gym that are getting ready, for shows. So they're going to take the GLP-1 to get down to weight, and be off of it, before all their testing and stuff. Can you see this possibly almost being like an eating disorder where losing weight is like controlling everything?
Yeah, I think that there's a potential, and I'm not a psychologist, but I think there is a potential for disorder there. And I can only speak from my own experience, which is just being sort of radically honest and vulnerable for a moment. About 10 or 15 years ago, I lost weight through diet and exercise alone, but I had a very unhealthy relationship with food at that time, where I was effectively I just wasn't eating. And I ended up at the sort of lower weights that I got to, struggling with an eating disorder, where I was viewing food in a very disordered way, of thinking that food was bad and putting so much guilt on myself if I ate anything. And that's sort of a natural function that we have to do to survive, which is, really a really bad place to be in. And what I found with being on a GLP-1 is for me personally, it took that element out of it, of most of it anyway, the guilt around associated with eating and it being a value judgment, and instead more of just this is a healthcare program that I'm on. It helped me a lot in that way. Now, I think with maintenance, it's maybe a different story. Because I think with maintenance, and you touched on it a little bit in your introduction to that question, which is, okay, when do I stop? How much weight loss is enough? What's my ideal weight? Do I want to lose some more to kind of give myself a cushion so if I gain some back? And this is where I think another element is going to need to be psychological support for people,
Hmm.
because there are going to be periods where your weight will fluctuate. I think when we're on maintenance, it's not going to be, you're going to be at the same weight forever and ever. You're probably going to fluctuate up and down, I don't know, 10 pounds, whatever that number is. And so you'll probably have to keep weighing yourself consistently, keep learning to keep an eye on it and adjusting your behavior according to it and knowing what a sort of a healthy range is for you, with an emphasis on healthy. And for me, I'm still learning that process. I don't think it's as easy as just you take the medication and now you're good to go. I think it's something we have to learn with, and it certainly could be disordered. You mentioned the people using it for vanity reasons or get ready for a show, or they're filming something and they want to look good. Okay, fine. They can do what they want to do. I'm more interested in it more broadly for people like myself who struggle with our weight. It has huge impacts on our health, our ability to function, the way we move about in the world, and for whom just eating less and exercising really hasn't been enough on its own.
It's kind of funny because I'll see an actor or actress on TV, and like I know something was filmed like 6, 8 months ago, and then like I'll see them on a live talk show or something, and I'm like, oh, they dropped a lot of weight. I wonder
Yeah.
what GLP medication they're on.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I think one of the other things that I've been thinking a lot about is, and this is not necessarily medical, it's more societal, is the value judgment that people put on body weight and on how you achieve that body weight. And it seems that there's almost a stigma associated with being on a GLP-1 medication, like you cheated, like you didn't do it the honest way. And I've fallen into that trap myself too. But I think that is so, that's an outdated way of thinking about things. I think it places weight on this pedestal of personal responsibility and morality that doesn't reflect the reality of the world that we live in and the complexities of the world that we live in. And it also ignores the health benefits. If you were given a choice between forever being overweight and struggling for a variety of reasons, some of which are medical, or being at a healthier weight and all of the benefits that are going to come along with that, why would you choose to be unhealthy? I mean, assuming you could afford medication and all that, why would you choose to be unhealthy, put yourself at all those risks just because someone else says, well, that's cheating if you do that? It doesn't make sense to me. And I think we need to change the narrative around that in our culture.
Absolutely. And I think that Serena Williams coming out that she was on a GLP-1 medication helped a lot, because you certainly can't say that she doesn't work hard enough, and she has money where she could afford the cooks, all the dietitians and meal planning, and she still couldn't lose that, extra little weight.
Yeah. I didn't actually know about that. That's interesting.
And it's like, when she came out, I think people like that and telling stories like this are going to hopefully help the bad stigma around the medication. That's my hope.
I hope so. I think my hope is that, but also that culturally we can change the way that we look at weight and the way that we look at body weight, body composition, away from it being a moral judgment or a value judgment and towards being a medical situation, a medical condition that people have, and that everyone's on a journey and not, categorizing people. I think one of the things I haven't talked about much, and I want to think about how to talk about this topic, is just how differently people treat me post losing weight. It's really night and day in a way that I don't celebrate, because it makes me think about how much of how people view you is tied up in that, and how it really shouldn't be that way. And I would like for us to kind of move away from that and start thinking about it from a medical perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I keep reminding people, I was listening to a lecture online. I forgot who was giving it, but I always thought that overeating causes obesity. And this lecturer, he pointed out that no, obesity causes overeating.
Hmm.
Never quite looked at it that way before.
Well, if you think about it, first of all, I believe that's true. I think we've all had friends growing up who they eat all the same foods that we do. They just naturally eat less, and they are at a healthier body weight. And I think I think there's a certain biology underlying that. Maybe they naturally make more GLP-1 peptide than we do, but we evolved in a world that had scarce food. And if you saw something that had high fat, high sugar, you would eat it right away because you don't know when you're going to get the next thing. And so our brains are still wired that way, even though we live in a world of excesses, right? Where you essentially can have as many calories as you want on demand, and prices are going up, sure, but relative to how much we need to survive, it's extreme. But our brains are still wired to look at things in that way, and our bodies are still programmed to deal with things in that way and to see, the absence of calories as starvation. And so they don't know, our bodies don't know that. And I think that's what we're up against. And we're trying to start using medical technology now to help us adapt to the new world that we live in.
Absolutely. I'm sure if you go to a gathering and you have one platter of chicken wings and a platter of um, uncooked broccoli and cauliflower, I could pretty much tell you which one's going to disappear first.
I think so. You need to deep fry or maybe you could air fry the broccoli. That would be good.
Absolutely. Well, or hopefully the chicken wings are air fried and not deep fried.
Yeah, for sure.
But that brings us to another point. There are other ways to achieve the food that we like and make them a little bit healthier. Like you said, with the air fryer versus deep frying and so forth.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, and this I think is important. One of the things you mentioned earlier on is fad dieting. I don't think you said it that way, but the idea of being on a diet where, okay, you can only eat lean meats. That's all you can eat. And you can't have any carbs at all. And, I think for most people, that's not realistic for the kinds of diets that we're used to. We're used to varied diets. There are certain foods we crave that we grew up with. And I think that for a long-term benefit, we should be looking at how to make better choices within the framework of what we already are accustomed to. And that might not be perfect, but I think that we can make improvements, right? So, even small decisions like I'm going to allow myself to go to Wendy's, but instead of getting French fries, I'm going to get a baked potato, right? Small things like that, I think, add up over the long term because for most of us, and this has been my experience, I think we gain weight slowly over time. You maybe gain a few pounds a year, and then you look back after a decade and you're like, oh my gosh, I've gained all this weight. But you think about how much that is, right? So gaining a pound is about 3,500 excess calories. And so that's not very much if you think about it. So let's say every week you're over by 500 calories. That could be one piece of cheesecake, right? You had one piece of cheesecake in the week, and otherwise you were completely balanced. And then over the span of a year, well, really a couple months, you're going to gain weight, right? It's going to happen over time. And I don't think that means that you did something wrong, right? I think what it means is that we need to just be better about training people to monitor and to understand what is a healthy weight range for me, to just make those better choices day to day and keep an eye on where you're at. And so you have interventions, like when you're in a case where you need to lose a lot of weight, you have something like GLP-1s, you have weight loss programs to help you get down to a healthier weight. But then figuring out how to manage that weight, to monitor where you are in your healthy range, and then what kinds of modifications can you do? Say, okay, well, I'm out of my comfort zone now of where I want to be with my weight. So now for this next period of time, I'm going to cut back to get myself back into the range. And then I'm going to go back to trying to do my normal thing and make better choices. And having a healthier relationship with food, with making those day-to-day choices that aren't the extreme I'm on keto now and I'm going to be on keto for the rest of my life. From my point of view, I don't think that's sustainable.
Mm-hmm. And that's been, I think, a lot of people's problem is because, like, I was on keto, lost a lot of weight. It's not sustainable. Stopped, gained it back. I was on like a cabbage soup diet, lost a decent amount of weight, but that's obviously not sustainable.
Yeah.
Where the GLP-1, it's like, what you crave, like you said, or what you want, your choices are different. And your brain is getting rewired, and you start to, like, I could live like this, I could do this, and I think we're all diet, even Weight Watchers, where they fail in the past is maintenance, because
Mm-hmm.
we all could lose it on any of those diets, but it's not sustainable and you can't maintain it. Where I think the choices and cravings and what we want and our better decisions, like air frying something, or going to Burger King and only eating part of it, uh, helps us,
Yeah.
because to me, no food is off limits. It's moderation, and I don't crave them that much. I can't even remember the last time I had a Burger King or McDonald's or anything like that. But if I want a burger, I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to get some, a sirloin burger, pop it in
Yeah.
the air fryer or grill it up myself, and maybe a whole wheat bun, and I'm going to have my hamburger.
Well, I think you said, I
I
mean, the
think it
key word
helps
is
us.
there was moderation, right? It's if you
Hmm.
allow yourself to have things, you have that piece of cheesecake and you kill that craving, then it doesn't, if it's not taboo, then you don't have this value attached to it. You just learn to manage around it. And I think from my perspective, one of the pieces that's because there are a lot of tools out there for people to lose weight, and some of them are more effective than others. You mentioned Weight Watchers. I haven't done Weight Watchers specifically. I did another program called Noom, Noom,
Hmm.
that is psychology focused. And it's all about trying to rewire your relationship with food. One of the big things that really stuck with me, I lost about 30 pounds on Noom, is maybe 5 years ago. And one of the things that really stuck with me was a lesson they had about not cleaning your plate, right? That it's okay to not clean your plate. Because I was raised in a meat and potatoes family where, you clean your plate, right? Like that's just how culturally how it was. And one of the things that Noom challenges you to do is leave one bite. You can eat 99% of your plate. Just leave one bite that you don't eat. Just kind of teach yourself that it's okay to leave food, which starts to allow you to train yourself to understand, okay, I'm going to stop when I'm full, not when my plate's empty. So that I think programs like that are very helpful. But then the piece that's missing is the medical support on the other end. So you do the program of your own volition, you lose the weight, and you're like, okay, I'm good to go. But I think that what we need to have more systemically is support from our medical system, from our doctors, right? And doctors don't get nutrition education. They just don't. And you might have some that maybe they're RDs and they've got some of that crossover training, or functional medicine doctors who are more forward thinking about that kind of thing. But most MDs, they don't have nutrition training. And so they don't think about it. They think about solving problems that are in front of them. And so if you're at a healthy weight, even if you've lost the weight, it's like, okay, congratulations, you're good. But that support still needs to be there about maintaining, monitoring, keeping you in a healthy zone, because that's going to have better long-term benefits than allowing you to yo-yo back up and then have to address that issue later on.
I don't know about you, but I plan on staying on a GLP-1 of some sort as long as I could afford it, because I know for myself, one time when I went on vacation, I'm like, well, maybe I'll just skip my shot because there's a lot of really good restaurants I will want to go to and so forth. And like day 11 or 12, I'm like, "Ooh, this probably wasn't the smartest choice to skip a shot." So I could see myself going back somewhat to some old habits. It may take me a little bit longer, but I plan on staying on a GLP-1 medication as long as I could afford it to sustain my weight.
Yeah, my current plan is my goal is to stay on as low a dose as I can to maintain a
Hmm.
healthy body weight. And I am comfortable, provided that I can afford it, I'm comfortable staying on it for a long term because of all the benefits that I've had and everything that I set up to this point about what I believe will be the long-term benefits of keeping a lower
Hmm.
body fat composition, lower visceral fat, and taking that through, especially as I go through midlife, and go through all of these
Hmm.
changes that are associated with that, and hopefully delaying a lot of the health issues that come with that. But it's not just the GLP. The other thing is, like, I think it has to be that plus making the good choices plus the
Hmm.
resistance training. Those my goal is to do all of those things. And to me, obviously, you have to pay for the medication, but my own sort of system that I have internally is that I've got to earn the medication, right? I've got to put in the other piece of you got to do the work, you got to do the exercise, and it all fits together, right? It improves mood, it improves energy, it helps maintain that lean body mass, the bone mass, and I want to do not just the GLP, I want to maintain all of those as long as I can. And I think realistically, there will come a time in my life where I gain some weight back. And my goal is not to never gain weight. My goal is to be aware of it and to try to address it early so that I'm not in a crisis like I was 3 years ago.
Absolutely. So have you heard anything about the Tirzepatide or any of the next generation of medications?
I've heard that it's Reddit. I've heard it's very effective. I don't know when it's coming out, but I mean, I think at this point, the pathway, the target for the drug target for GLP-1 receptor agonists, it's validated, right? We have now at least 3 drugs on the market that are effective there. I think we're going to have more and more of them coming out, and so I think we're going to see continued growth in this space, continued options, and hopefully a lot more research to help us understand the long-term benefits and risks associated with these drugs and the best way to help people get their body composition in a good spot and how to maintain that over the long run. I'm really excited to see how the research evolves.
Absolutely. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, and I really appreciate you taking some time out to do this. And I tend to end these with having you give your best advice to somebody thinking about starting a GLP-1 medication or literally just started.
Oh, that's a great question. I think the advice I would give you, someone taking it, starting on it, is be patient. I think that I've talked to a lot of people who have started the medications and gotten frustrated because they're not having results right away. They're not necessarily losing weight right away. And from my perspective, the way I look at it is, it took you a long time to put the weight on. You should expect it to take a while to come back off, and that is okay. That is how our bodies work, right? You don't just take it and then immediately lose all the weight. And the second piece, sort of like 1B, is resistance training. Doing that strength training to whatever degree you can. Ideally that's 3 times a week, but if you can do it once a week, okay, do what works for you to try to maintain as much of that muscle, bone as you can while you're losing that weight is going to give you better results. And I think you'll be much happier overall at the end of the day when you've taken that approach.
And to somebody thinking about doing it?
I mean, I think if someone's thinking about doing it, you got to weigh the pros and cons for your own personal situation, right? Obviously, right now, there's a significant cost. Unless you have medication that can cover it or you have diabetes, in that case, usually insurance will cover it. There's a cost associated with it, and you have to do the cost-benefit analysis. If you're someone who is overweight and has never tried dieting and exercising, I would try that first, because that might work for you. That might be enough for you to get to, and making small changes to get where you want to be. But if you're someone like me, who struggled for a long time throughout your adulthood to maintain your weight, or you've had other extraneous factors like eating disorders, it might be a good option to try it out. And so I would consider it, and to not let the stigma potentially associated with it be what guides your decision, and instead let it be a conversation with your doctor or doctors in your case, and what is best for your health guide that decision.
I want to thank you for taking time out of your day and doing this. Appreciate it. I want to remind everybody that Mark's information is going to be linked in the description. So please like and subscribe to this channel, and then go on over to his and do the same. Again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.